All right, so when you are around other people, how would you describe your social style? Would you say that you tend to be the person who goes after what they want? Do you tend to be a little bit more reserved and quiet? Or maybe are you the type who says, okay, what's expected me of this situation? And maybe that's what I'll do. Well, today we're going to talk about the 3 social styles of the Enneagram. And I'm going to share one strategy that you can use based on your type that will help you feel better more often. If we haven't met, I am Kat from My Happy Insides, and I help people to uncover the hidden reasons that they're feeling stuck so that you can break free and start thriving. So let's jump into today's topic, these social styles. So first off, if you are familiar with the Enneagram or not, you'll know that there are 9 types. Now, these 9 types are actually broken into these 3 different social styles. Now, the social styles are also called these Hornevian groups. And you can see on this diagram how they are clustered into these 3 different groups. Now, before I actually get into the details about these groups, I want to first go back to a different triad, and that is the centers of intelligence. Now, if you are not familiar with the centers of intelligence, then I invite you to check out my video on the 3 centers. I'll link to that. Now, when it comes to these centers, the reason I'm bringing them up is that they have everything to do with our social styles. So each Enneagram type has a tendency to neglect one of these 3 centers, and then they identify primarily with the other 2 centers. And that's sort of where we get this personality. When we're going along on autopilot, we tend to neglect one center and focus on the other 2. So let's get into the 3 different types. I'm going to start with the assertive type. So types 3, 7, and 8 are what we describe the assertive types. Now they tend to primarily be identified with their body center and their head center, meaning there's a lot of thinking and doing, but not a lot of feeling, because this group tends to leave out the emotions. Now, this doesn't mean that they're not emotional. I'm an assertive type and I feel things, but it does mean that most of the time when their personality is running the show, they are focused on just acting and thinking. They are constantly in motion. They're often quite productive types. But one of the ways they do that is they leave aside the feelings and just focus on the head and the body. Now, this means that when they're in a group, often they are one of the first people to speak up because they go after what they want directly and actively. Now, our next group we call the dutiful type. So the dutiful type are types 1, 2, and 6. So this type, and sometimes they're referred to as the compliant type, they're actually trying to say, what is the right thing to do in this situation? Now, this means that they neglect their head center and they rely more on their gut and their emotions. So their instinct and their feelings are really what's driving them forward. They're saying, I got to do what's right. When you think about that, that's really driven from more of a gut center as well as the heart. So what happens is sometimes they're not thinking clearly. They're so driven to take action with feeling that they're not always using their head and thinking about what they should be doing. Instead, they focus more on what they feel they should be doing. Now, what happens in a group setting is that often this group rises to the occasion. Having 1s, 2s, and 6s around often means that you're going to have people who are doing what is expected of them to do, which can be a great thing, but sometimes difficult with boundaries. Now, let's look at the 3rd group, which is the withdrawn group, 4, 5s, and 9s. So this group has a tendency to focus more on feeling and thinking and not so much that instinct. What that means is they neglect the body center. And if you imagine the body center being offline, you can imagine a person who's a little bit disengaged from their environment and their outside world and tends to be a little bit more drawn into their inside world. Now, these withdrawn types spend a lot of time in their heads, kind of daydreaming, ruminating, fantasizing, and often they're kind of cut off from the outside world. It's one of the ways that they get what they want is by withdrawing and disengaging from others, and they neglect that body center. Now, do you know which one you are? If you know your type, your Enneagram type, then now you should know what your social style is. So if you do, let me know in the comments. And if you're not sure what Enneagram type you are, but you just heard about those 3 different social styles, let me know which social style sounds most like you. The cool thing about the social styles or the Hornevian groups is it's actually a good technique to narrow down which type you are. Sometimes people will misidentify and they'll mistype. And when they learn more about these different groupings, they'll start to say, oh, you know what? That doesn't actually sound like me. I sound more like this other type. Now, I promised that I would share a strategy, and the strategy is based on your grouping. So the strategy is all about focusing on the center that you neglect the most. And it means bringing all 3 centers online. So there are already 2 that you primarily identify with, and that is part of what makes up your personality. So when you take the effort to connect with that 3rd center, that neglected center, you can actually start to feel a lot better. And that's because you're more present. When you connect with your body, your heart, and your head all at the same time, you will feel better and you'll feel like you start thriving. Now, I have mentioned already that there's the centers of intelligence and then there are the social styles, but there's another grouping that I'm going to share about, but not today. So stay tuned. I'm going to be coming out with a video on the harmonic centers, and that's all about how we cope when things are not going our way. So if you are not already, I invite you to subscribe so that you don't miss out when a new video comes on board. The other option is that you can sign up for my email newsletter. I send out when new content comes out so that you also won't miss it. I've got the link below. So now that you know about the social styles and your strategy, I hope that you connect with all 3 and start thriving.